How are you holding up in the heat? You doing okay? Okay. I'm so glad I made it till this point because I'm from Germany and we rarely see the sun and my brain is fried. So excuse me if anything goes wrong, it's not on me, it's the weather. But until that happens, I'm going to talk about Svelte and accessibility. And just because I'm going to use that abbreviation a lot, I want to clear that out. So the a11y, or sometimes pronounced as ally, that stands for accessibility, the 11 letters between the A and the Y. And so just before we get started, I quickly want to introduce myself. I'm Josefine. As Katarina already said, I'm DevRel at Storyblog, and I'm also a Girl Code ambassador. So Girl Code is fighting for equal rights for women and non-binary folks in tech and trying to promote equal pay. So really good cause. And yeah, I come from a communications background, so I have been in tech for, 3 years now. And it's still a bit of a transition, so it was a bit of a culture shock coming in here. So be kind to me. But today we're going to talk about Svelte and accessibility. And so just to clear it out, so we're going to have a look at what web accessibility is and why it's important. We're going to have a look at Svelte because they have some really cool compiler warnings that are going to help us make our code more accessible. And there are a couple of things they're missing, so we're going to have a look at how we can bridge the gap as developers. Right, let's dive into web accessibility. So web accessibility basically means that we design and implement the tools and technologies that we use in a way that they're also possible to be used by people with disabilities and that they can participate equally on the web. And it's also a basic human right as defined by the United Nations. If that doesn't convince you, I have a number for you, so a really big one, actually. So there was this report by the World Health Organization, and they found that over 15% of our entire global population is experiencing some form of disability. And of course, global data is really hard to measure, and the experience of disability as well. But even if it's just a ballpark, that's a massive number. Large spending power behind that, and a lot of people you should care about. Also, as a society, we're growing older, so it's going to affect all of us at some point. And web accessibility is great for folks without disabilities as well. I'm going to show you some examples. So here we can see different kinds of disabilities like neurological, auditory, visual, all the different kinds, and they're permanent disabilities. But here you can see that there are also things like temporary or situational limitations. So these are situations that you might find yourself in where you're going to benefit massively from web accessibility. So it could be like maybe you have a broken arm, which would be a temporary disability, or you're holding a baby and you literally just can use one hand. Or you're in a space where you cannot turn on your volume on your phone, for example, and you're relying on captions in a video. Or maybe you have terrible internet connection, or you're using a device that's not generally used to put in text. For example, I don't know, if you're using your remote control to find something on your TV, it's really dreadful. So all of these cases are cases in which web accessibility is going to help you and it's going to make your life easier. What does that mean in practice? So it could mean things like providing enough color contrast, being open to different input methods, providing proper context through your HTML structure, for example, and being open to assistive technologies. So not everybody is using a mouse or a trackpad. All right, so we got the basics cleared on web accessibility. Let's have a closer look at Svelte. Anybody working with Svelte these days? A few, okay. Are you liking it? I see some happy faces, that's good. All right, so Svelte is, for those of you who don't know, is a relatively new compiler. It's completely open source. It was developed by Rich Harris and is maintained by their core team. And funnily enough, it's rated the most loved framework on Stack Overflow. There was a survey and they found it's really popular apparently. And basically what it's doing, it's generating highly optimized JavaScript. And I guess that's what makes it so popular. It's relatively performant. And now it's also set to be an accessibility first framework. And that's really what got me hooked, because I think that's already a pretty bold statement. It's kind of cool. And we're going to have a look at what that means. So there are compiler warnings that you might have noticed if you have been working with Svelte. No worries if you haven't. I'm going to show you some example. And basically, they're running at compile time, checking for different kinds of accessibility issues, and yeah, giving you a heads up that maybe you're not following the best practices. And so that could look like this, for example. So if you're setting autofocus to an input element, for example, you're going to get a warning because, well, I mean, autofocus in itself might already be confusing if you're taking the user where they're not sure where it's going. If you're an assistive technology or on a mobile phone, that's going to get even worse, right? Because you're teleporting the user to a place that they didn't necessarily sign up to being. So you'll get a warning for that as well. You will also get a warning if you're using a positive tab index. So, I mean, if you use a keyboard to navigate a page and you tap through, you should get to all the interactive elements, right? And if you want to include something that is generally not in that tab order, you could give it a tab index 0 and make it part of that flow if you tap through the page. And if you give it a negative tab index, you're going to take it out of the flow. But a positive index, again, is going to prioritize that element and just teleport the people where you wanted them to be. And again, that's also very, very confusing if you're on a screen reader because you don't know how you got there and it's not considered really good practice. There are also things like required attributes that you get warnings about. So I already mentioned the alt attribute, for example, and also things like if you forget to include the language tag, the language attribute in the HTML tag, you're not providing the default language. And I guess if you're driving and with Google Maps, for example, and you have your assistant read out to, like the Google Maps read out to you where you're going, and you leave your country, and it's going to pronounce things very weirdly, right? It's really hard to understand and really hard to follow. That's what's going to happen to your screen reader if you're forgetting to put in the HTML language attribute. The last thing I want to point out is that it's also there are also some warnings for like smaller structural things. So, for example, if you have a fig caption, that should be the direct child of a figure element, right? So it's not a massive structure that it's investigating, but it's already a start. So all of these are really, really great, right? It's cool that we're having these accessibility warnings, and they're covering some things. But of course, that's not all. That's part of accessibility. So there are a couple of things that the warnings are missing. I didn't cover all of them, by the way, so there's a full list that you can find in the docs for Svelte, but you get the gist, right? It's mainly individual components. It's missing things like overarching structures, the headline hierarchies, tab order. Well, I mean, we're getting there with the tab index, but it's not fully accessible, and everything that's visual, like color contrast, is not going to be checked by the compiler warnings. So not to worry, there are a couple of things that you could do. So there are some tools I'm going to show you. Those are just personal favorites. So I'm happy to chat if you have something that you think is a lot better. I'm always happy to learn. But we're going to have a look at tools that help you investigate a bit if your accessibility is up to speed. So the first one I want to mention, let's see if that's, oh, it's working, great. The first one I want to show you are the XDev tools. So that's an extension. I'm using the one for Chrome here, and it's giving you a general overview of the kinds of issues that you have on your page. So you can go through all of them. It's going to highlight them. It's going to check for alt tags, links, and the list goes on. You can basically go through them one by one and check whether this is something that you have to improve, or maybe that it's intentionally the way it is. It's also providing, as you can see here, further information from Duke University. So they're basically giving you some context of what it is that you should be fixing here and how you can do that. All right, so that's more of a general overview that you get there. And then the next tool I want to show you is a web disability simulator. So this is meant to give a bit of Well, I'm simulating the experience of different kinds of disabilities that people, or yeah, the experiences that people could have on your page, right? So here you see, for example, total color blindness. And of course, this is going to be a bit different for everybody. And the experience is not 100% accurate all the time for all these examples that they have in there. But it's already giving you a glimpse of what different kind of user groups could be seeing on your page. There's also sunshine in there, for example, and if I try that, you see you will need a lot more color contrast to be able to see everything on the page. And some of the images are really hard to see. So it's meant for, yeah, to make testing easier and also to lower the threshold of seeing what things could be like for different people. This is one of my favorite tools, actually. So this is going to help you visualize the tab order that you have on your page. So it's going to help you basically tab through your page, check what kind of elements are accessible through the keyboard and whether you want them to be and if they are in the right order. So you want to follow the logical flow that somebody has through your page, right? So in English, that would be from top to bottom, from left to right. And it's checking and visualizing that for you. And the last tool I want to show you is a color contrast checker. We've already seen a really cool one this morning from Kyle. And this one is my personal favorite because it has this little droplet that helps you pick the color. And you can check whether the background color and the foreground color have enough contrast between them. So it's providing a number for us. We have a contrast of 10. Oh, that was for the black and white, 10 something. So that means we're passing the different levels, AA and AAA for different sizes. And again, I think Kyle mentioned them this morning if you were here already. So these are just standards that have been defined to make it easier to follow these rules, but we're passing all the different levels that we need, basically. So to sum up, there are already a lot of really cool things going on, right? We have these compiler warnings. They're checking for different required attributes. They're checking if your HTML structure is roughly okay. The tab index is checked, but it's also missing a couple of overarching things. Hierarchies you should be checking for with other tools. The keyboard navigation and all the visual things like color contrast and motion. So I guess you could say it's not a shortcut, but it's a really great start already. And now it's basically on you. So I highly encourage you to get started today. Try a tool. Maybe try navigating your page with a keyboard for just half an hour and see how far that takes you and how it's going. Be curious and dare to try things. That was already all from my side. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to chat afterwards.